I am Sadie Wilson, 56 years old, a retired high school teacher who put everything I had into raising my son Jason after his father walked out on us when he was just 2. I never thought the day would come when my own flesh and blood would look me in the eyes across our dinner table and call me a loser compared to his father's young new wife. I said nothing that night, but I had plans. Before I tell you what happened next, if you're watching this from somewhere where family loyalty still matters, hit subscribe. If you've ever faced heartbreaking ingratitude from those you've sacrificed everything for. Growing up in a small suburb of Chicago, I never imagined my life would turn out this way. I was Sadie Thompson back then, with dreams of becoming a professor of literature at some prestigious university. But life has a way of redirecting our paths when we least expect it. I met Michael Wilson during my junior year of college. He was charming, ambitious, and pursuing a business degree. We fell in love quickly, married young at 23, and I happily took his last name, believing we would build our forever together. I put my doctoral plans on hold to support his career, telling myself there would be time later for my dreams. Jason came along 3 years into our marriage. He was the most beautiful baby with his father's blue eyes and my auburn hair. From the moment I held him, I knew I would do anything for this child. Michael was a good father at first, but as his career in financial consulting grew, he spent less time at home and more time traveling for business. Our marriage lasted 22 years before it all fell apart. Jason was 19 and starting college when I discovered Michael had been having an affair with Brenda, a 35-year-old marketing executive at his firm. The divorce blindsided me. Michael moved out immediately, leaving me with a mortgage I could barely afford, a mountain of credit card debt I didn't know we had, and a son who was devastated by his father's departure. I took a second job teaching night classes at the community college to make ends meet. During the day, I continued my job at Lincoln High teaching English literature, and in the evenings, I would drag my exhausted body to teach basic composition to adults. Every penny went to keeping our home, paying down debt, and making sure Jason had everything he needed for college. Jason had always been a somewhat spoiled child. Being our only son, both Michael and I had lavished attention on him. He was used to getting what he wanted. When he graduated high school, despite our increasingly tight finances, Michael and I had split the cost of a new car for him, a blue Ford Mustang that cost far more than we should have spent. I remember eating ramen noodles for lunch for months afterward to help cover my share of the payments. After the divorce, I continued making the car payments alone. I also paid Jason's college tuition, not wanting him to start life with student loans like I had. When he moved into an off-campus apartment his sophomore year, I covered his rent, utilities, phone bill, and sent him a generous monthly allowance for food and spending, all while I was working 60-hour weeks and cutting every possible personal expense. Michael, despite his 6-figure salary, contributed the bare minimum in child support mandated by our divorce decree. He was too busy building his new life with Brenda, traveling to exotic locations and posting their adventures on social media for everyone, including Jason, to see. As time passed, Jason began spending more weekends with his father and Brenda in their luxury downtown condo. He would return home with stories about their home theater, the rooftop pool, and Brenda's connections in the business world. I noticed how his eyes lit up, describing their lifestyle, a stark contrast to our modest suburban home that was becoming increasingly outdated as I deferred maintenance to pay for his education. 2 years ago, Michael and Brenda married in a lavish ceremony in the Bahamas. Jason was the best man. I wasn't invited, of course, but I saw the pictures on Facebook. My son, handsome in his tailored suit, standing next to his father, and his new stepmother, who was only 11 years older than him. After that wedding, something shifted in Jason's attitude toward me. His visits home became less frequent. When he did come, he seemed distracted and bored constantly, comparing our simple life to the glamorous existence his father and Brenda shared. He would make comments like, "Dad and Brenda just bought a vacation home in Aspen," or "Brenda connected me with the CEO of a major tech company for an internship interview." Each comparison felt like a small knife in my heart, but I smiled and expressed happiness for his opportunities. After all, wasn't that what motherhood was about? Wanting the best for your child, even when it hurt. By the time Jason graduated college last year with a business degree just like his father, our relationship had deteriorated to occasional texts and monthly obligatory visits. I still paid his rent for a luxury apartment near his new entry-level marketing job, covered his car insurance, cell phone, and various subscription services. I told myself it was just until he got established in his career, just until he got his first promotion or bonus, just a little longer. Deep down, I knew I was enabling his entitled behavior, but the fear of losing him completely kept me writing checks I could barely afford. The thought of my only child cutting me off entirely was too painful to contemplate. So I continued to sacrifice, continued to work extra hours, continued to go without so he wouldn't have to. Martha, my closest friend since college and fellow English teacher, warned me repeatedly. Sadie, you're not helping him by paying for everything. He needs to learn financial responsibility, she would say during our weekly coffee meetups. I would nod in agreement, but never follow through with making any changes. The fear was too great. Your problem, Martha told me once, is that you're afraid of not being needed, but there's a difference between being needed and being used. I dismissed her words then, but they would come back to me later with painful clarity. As the months passed after Jason's graduation, I noticed he was spending more and more time with Michael and Brenda. His social media was filled with photos of business networking events. Brenda had taken him to weekends at their vacation property and expensive restaurants I could never afford to visit. Meanwhile, my invitations for simple home-cooked meals were met with last-minute cancellations or claims of being too busy. It hurt, but I told myself it was normal for a young man to be drawn to the excitement and opportunities his father and stepmother could provide. I tried not to take it personally, even as I continued depleting my retirement savings to support his comfortable lifestyle. Then came the day I decided to make one more attempt at reconnecting with my son. I called Jason and invited him for dinner at home, promising to make his favorite meal, beef bourguignon, just like I used to make for special occasions when he was growing up. To my surprise and delight, he agreed. I spent the entire day cleaning the house, trying to make our modest home as presentable as possible. I knew it couldn't compare to Michael and Brenda's sleek, modern condo, but I hoped the warmth and memories would make up for what we lacked in luxury. I even bought a small gift for Jason, a personalized leather portfolio for his work documents, stretching my budget yet again. Little did I know that this dinner would become the turning point in our relationship, though not in the way I had hoped. It would be the night that finally opened my eyes to what my relationship with my adult son had truly become. I spent hours preparing for Jason's visit that Friday evening. The beef had been marinating since the night before. I dusted every surface, vacuumed every corner, and even splurged on fresh flowers for the dining room table. I wanted everything to be perfect. I decided to wear a new blouse I had been saving for a special occasion, applied a bit more makeup than usual, and even styled my hair instead of pulling it back in my typical ponytail. Looking in the mirror, I saw a woman trying desperately to impress her own son. The thought made me pause, but I pushed the discomfort aside. This was about rebuilding our relationship. Appearances shouldn't matter, but somehow they did. Jason was supposed to arrive at 6:30. At 6:45, I received a text. Running late, traffic, be there soon. I kept the food warm and waited patiently. By 7:30, I was checking my phone every few minutes, wondering if he had forgotten. Finally, at 7:45, I heard his car pull into the driveway. Sorry I'm late, he said as he walked through the door, not making eye contact as he scrolled through his phone. Meeting ran long and then traffic was a nightmare. That's okay, sweetheart. I'm just happy you're here, I responded, moving in for a hug that turned awkward when he half turned away to finish whatever he was typing on his phone. Jason had grown into a handsome young man with his father's height and strong jawline. That night, he was dressed in an expensive-looking button-down shirt and designer jeans that I knew cost more than my weekly salary. His watch, a graduation gift from Michael and Brenda, probably cost more than my car. The house smells good, he commented, finally putting his phone in his pocket. Is that beef bourguignon? Yes, your favorite. I beamed, leading him to the dining room where I had set the table with my best dishes, the ones that had belonged to my grandmother. Jason glanced around and I saw something in his expression that looked like pity embarrassment. It was gone quickly, replaced by a polite smile that didn't reach his eyes. I opened a bottle of red wine. Would you like some? I offered. Sure, a small glass. I'm driving later, meeting some friends downtown. My heart sank a little at the realization that he had already planned to cut our evening short, but I maintained my smile as I poured the wine and brought the food to the table. As we began to eat, I tried to engage Jason in conversation, asking about his job, his friends, his life. His answers were short, distracted, and he checked his phone at least a dozen times during the first 20 minutes of our meal. "The food is good," he said after a while, though he had barely touched it. "Different from what I'm used to eating these days. Brenda's got me trying all these keto and paleo dishes. She says it's better for fitness and brain function." "Oh, that's interesting. I've read about those diets," I replied, grasping at any thread of conversation. "Are you enjoying them?" Jason shrugged. "They're okay. Brenda's personal chef makes them taste pretty good." "Personal chef?" I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. "Yeah, they hired one a few months ago. Comes in 3 times a week. It's pretty convenient." The conversation stalled again. I told him about some of my former students who had come back to visit, about the book club I had joined, about Martha's daughter getting engaged. Jason nodded occasionally but offered little in return. Finally, after a particularly long pause where the only sound was forks against plates, Jason looked around the dining room with a critical eye. "You know, Mom, you really should update this place. It looks exactly the same as it did when I was in high school. Same furniture, same wall color, same everything." The comment stung, but I tried to laugh it off. "Well, on a teacher's salary, redecorating isn't exactly a priority, but maybe someday." Jason frowned. "You could have done more with your career, you know. Dad always said you were smart enough to be running the English department or even working in administration. The money would be better." "I preferred teaching," I said quietly. "I loved being in the classroom with the students. But look what it got you." He gestured around. "Stuck in this outdated house driving a 10-year-old car while Dad and Brenda are living their best lives." The phrase jabbed at my heart. Living their best lives, at the expense of abandoning commitments I thought bitterly but didn't say. "I'm happy with my choices, Jason," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Not everyone measures success by material possessions." Jason scoffed, a sound so dismissive it made me flinch. "That's what people say when they don't have any." "Jason," I said, feeling heat rise to my face. "That's unkind." He shrugged and checked his phone again. "Just being honest. Dad and Brenda talk about it sometimes, how you never really lived up to your potential, how you were content to just coast through life as a high school teacher in the suburbs." The casual cruelty of his words and the revelation that my ex-husband and his wife discussed me this way with my son took my breath away. I placed my fork down carefully, no longer hungry. "They've done a lot for me, you know," Jason continued, apparently oblivious to the pain he was causing. "Brenda's introduced me to so many important people in the industry. Dad's teaching me about investing, about building real wealth. Things I never learned from you." I sat silently, unable to form words as my son continued. "Last weekend, they took me to their country club, introduced me to a partner at Deloitte. Do you know how valuable that kind of connection is? What have you ever done to help my career?" The question hung in the air between us. What had I done? Only worked 2 jobs for years to put him through college. Only sacrificed every personal comfort to ensure he had the best of everything. Only loved him unconditionally since the moment he was born. "I've supported you as best I could, Jason," I finally managed to say. "Yeah, I guess," he said dismissively. "But it's not the same. Dad and Brenda are really setting me up for success. They understand how the real world works." I took a deep breath, trying to salvage the evening. "I'm glad they're helping you. I only want what's best for you." Jason looked at me, then really looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes wasn't gratitude or love, but a cold assessment. "The thing is, Mom," he said slowly, "when I look at my life, I have to be strategic about who I spend time with. Dad and Brenda are going places. They have connections, influence. What do you have to offer?" The question hit me like a physical blow. Before I could respond, Jason delivered the final devastating line. "Let's be honest here. You are a loser, Mom. Living in the past, stuck in this dead-end life. But Dad's new wife is not. She's successful, connected, ambitious. Everything you never were." Time seemed to stop. The dining room with its carefully set table and slowly cooling food blurred around the edges as his words echoed in my head. "You are a loser, Mom." My son, the baby I had nursed, the child I had comforted after nightmares, the teenager whose heartbreaks I had soothed the young man for whom I had sacrificed everything, had just called me a loser to my face. I could have shouted, I could have cried, I could have thrown him out of the house. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I stayed completely silent. My silence seemed to unnerve Jason more than any reaction would have. He shifted in his seat, then checked his phone again, using it as a shield. "Anyway," he said, his voice falsely bright, "I should probably get going soon, meeting some friends at 9. Still, I said nothing as I stood and began clearing the plates, including his mostly untouched meal. "Mom," he said, uncertain now. "Did you hear what I said?" I nodded, but continued silently stacking dishes. "Look, I'm just being honest. Dad says sometimes you need tough love to make changes." I carried the dishes to the kitchen, my back straight, my movements deliberate. When I returned to the dining room, Jason was standing keys in hand. "Thanks for dinner," he said awkwardly. "I'll text you later this week." I walked him to the door, my face carefully blank. As he stepped onto the porch, he turned back. "You're not mad, are you? I'm just trying to help you see reality." I finally spoke, my voice calm and quiet. "Good night, Jason." Before he could respond, I closed the door gently but firmly. Through the window, I watched him stand there for a moment, looking confused before shrugging and walking to his car. The car I was still making payments on. As the sound of his engine faded into the distance, I returned to the dining room and looked at the remnants of our dinner. The special meal I had spent hours preparing, the good wine I had splurged on, the flowers I had arranged so carefully. "You are a loser, Mom." The words replayed in my mind as I mechanically cleared the rest of the table. With each dish, I washed each surface. I wiped clean, a new thought began to form. A realization that had been a long time coming. This could not continue. Something had to change. That night, after Jason left, I sat on the edge of my bed in complete silence. The tears I had expected didn't come. Instead, a strange numbness spread through me, as if my body was protecting me from the full impact of my son's cruel words. I reached for the drawer in my bedside table and pulled out a photo album I hadn't looked at in years. It contained pictures of Jason from birth through high school graduation. I slowly turned the pages, watching him grow from a tiny red-faced newborn to a gap-toothed first grader, from an awkward preteen to a confident high school senior. There we were at the zoo when he was 4, both of us laughing as we fed the giraffes. There he was at 8, proudly holding up the trophy from his first soccer tournament. There we were at his 16th birthday, standing next to the cake I had specially ordered to look like a football field, his passion at the time. And finally, his high school graduation, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling brightly toward a future we thought would be shared. In every photo, my love for him was evident. The pride in my eyes, the supportive arm around his shoulders, the carefully planned celebrations of every milestone. What had happened to that close relationship? When had I become someone to dismiss, to evaluate for strategic value in his life? I closed the album and placed it back in the drawer. For the first time, I allowed myself to face some hard truths about what our relationship had become. I had sacrificed my own needs, my own future, to give Jason everything. I had put my dreams of further education on hold indefinitely. I had worked myself to exhaustion to provide him with luxuries I couldn't afford for myself. I had emptied my retirement savings to keep him in the lifestyle to which he had become accustomed. And what had it gotten me? A son who saw me as a loser, who measured my worth by the size of my house and the model of my car. A son who could sit across from me at dinner and cruelly compare me unfavorably to the woman his father had left me for. I got up and walked to my small home office where I kept my financial records. I pulled out the folder labeled Jason's Expenses and began to go through it methodically. The numbers stared back at me, black and white evidence of my enabling behavior. Monthly rent for his luxury apartment, $1,800. Car payment, $350. Car insurance, $200. Cell phone, $120. Credit card payment. The card I had co-added him to for emergencies, varying amounts but averaging around $500 monthly. Utilities for his apartment, roughly $200. Streaming services and subscriptions, about $70. Monthly spending money, direct deposit, $600. All told, I was spending nearly $4,000 a month supporting my adult son who had a full-time job and who had just called me a loser to my face. $4,000 a month while I drove a car with 150,000 miles on it, while I put off fixing the leaky bathroom faucet because plumbers were expensive, while I bought my clothes from clearance racks and cut my own hair to save money, while I ate simple meals at home and brought leftovers for lunch every day. The phone rang, startling me out of my calculations. It was Martha. "So, how did the dinner go?" she asked cheerfully. I hesitated, then decided to be completely honest. "He called me a loser." "He what?" Martha's voice rose in disbelief. "He sat at my dining room table eating the meal I spent all day making in the house I've maintained for him his entire life, and told me I was a loser compared to his father's new wife." There was silence on the line for a moment. "Oh, Sadie," Martha finally said, her voice soft with sympathy. "What did you do?" "Nothing," I replied. "I didn't say anything, I just saw him out and closed the door." "Good for you," Martha said firmly. "Any reaction would have just fed into his drama. But Sadie, you know this has to be the last straw, right? You have to stop enabling him." "I know," I whispered, looking down at the expense sheets spread across my desk. "I'm sitting here right now looking at exactly how much I've been spending on him. It's almost my entire salary, Martha. I've been living on my retirement savings." "Oh, honey," Martha sighed. "We've talked about this for years. You can't set yourself on fire to keep him warm, especially when he doesn't even appreciate the heat." "You were right," I admitted. "All those times you told me I was hurting him by making things too easy, you were right and I didn't listen." "It's not too late to make changes," Martha encouraged. "He's young, he can adapt. The question is, are you ready to do what needs to be done, because he's not going to like it, Sadie. He's going to push back hard." I looked at the financial records again, thinking about Jason's dismissive attitude, his entitlement, his cruel words. "I'm ready," I said, with a firmness that surprised even me. "It ends now." After hanging up with Martha, I spent the night creating a detailed plan. I made lists, researched my legal options regarding the car loan and rental agreement where I was the guarantor, and calculated exactly how my financial situation would improve once I stopped supporting Jason. The numbers were eye-opening. Without Jason's expenses, I could not only live comfortably within my current income, but also start rebuilding my depleted retirement savings. I could finally fix the small issues around the house that I'd been neglecting. I could even take the summer trip to England I'd been dreaming about for years to visit the homes of the authors I loved to teach about. As the night wore on, my resolve strengthened. By the time dawn broke, I had a comprehensive plan and a surprising sense of peace. The son I had raised would need to become the independent adult I had failed to demand he be, and I would reclaim my life, my financial security, and my self-respect. I hadn't slept at all, but I felt more awake than I had in years. It was time to take back everything I had given away, not out of vengeance, but out of a belated recognition that I had been doing neither of us any favors with my enabling behavior. The next morning, I began implementing my plan with a focus and determination I hadn't felt in years. My first call was to Patricia Gonzalez, an attorney I knew from the community college where I taught night classes. She had a practice specializing in family law and financial matters. I needed advice about some financial entanglements with my adult son. I explained when we met later that morning. Patricia listened carefully as I detailed the situation, the car loan in my name, that Jason drove the rental agreement where I was the guarantor, the joint credit card, and all the various services I paid for. "From a legal standpoint, you have every right to stop payments on services that are in your name," she confirmed. "The car is more complicated since it's in your name but in his possession. The cleanest solution would be to either transfer the loan and title to him or to reclaim the vehicle. He won't be able to take over the loan with his current credit," I said, facing reality, "and I can't afford to keep making payments on a car I don't use." Patricia nodded. "Then you may need to reclaim the vehicle. As for the apartment, review the rental agreement carefully. Since you're the guarantor, you're ultimately responsible for the rent, but you can give notice to end the agreement at the next opportunity." I left her office with a clear understanding of my rights and responsibilities, and a solid plan for disentangling my finances from Jason's life. My next stop was the bank. I sat down with a financial advisor and explained that I needed to make changes to several automatic payments and account structures. "I'd like to close this joint credit card account," I said, sliding the card across the desk. "And these automatic transfers to this account need to stop immediately," I added, showing her the regular payments to Jason's checking account. The financial advisor, a woman about my age, gave me a knowing look. "Adult child?" she asked sympathetically. "Yes," I admitted. "I've been enabling behavior that needs to stop." She nodded. "I see this more often than you might think. Let's get these changes made for you today." By noon, I had closed the joint credit card, stopped all automatic payments to Jason's accounts, and set up a new checking account for myself that Jason had no access to. I transferred most of my funds to this new account, leaving just enough in the old one to cover any pending transactions. After the bank, I drove to the leasing office of Jason's apartment complex. The property manager, a brisk young woman named Tara, listened to my explanation. "Since I'm the guarantor on the lease and I've been making the payments, I need to know my options for ending the arrangement," I explained. Tara checked the records. The lease agreement has a 60-day notice requirement for termination. However, since you're not the tenant, we would need either Jason's agreement to vacate or a formal eviction if he refuses. "I understand," I said. "I'm not looking to have him evicted. I just need to stop being financially responsible for his housing. I'll be informing him that I won't be making any further rent payments, and he'll need to either take over or find other arrangements." "In that case," Tara advised, "I suggest putting your intention in writing to both Jason and to us. That starts the clock on your notice period as the guarantor." I wrote the formal notice right there in her office, made copies, and left with a weight lifting from my shoulders. My next calls were to the various service providers, the car insurance company, the cell phone provider, the streaming services, and other subscriptions I had been paying for. One by one, I either canceled the services or removed my payment information. With each call, each signature, each confirmation, I felt a sense of reclaiming my own life. This wasn't about punishing Jason. It was about establishing healthy boundaries that should have been in place long ago. By late afternoon, I had completed most of the financial separations. There was just one more significant step to take. I drove to the storage facility where I kept some of my late parents' furniture and heirlooms that wouldn't fit in my house. I had been paying for the storage unit for years, reluctant to part with these connections to my past. I spent 2 hours sorting through the contents, identifying items to sell, donate, or bring home. Letting go of some of these possessions was another form of reclaiming my life and resources. When I finally returned home, exhausted but resolute, I found time for one personal act that symbolized this day of change. I called a local salon and made an appointment for the following day, my first professional haircut in over 3 years. "I want something completely different," I told the receptionist. "Something that represents a new chapter." That evening, I wrote a letter to Jason. I explained clearly, but without recrimination, that I would no longer be providing financial support. I listed exactly what this meant. No more car payments, no more rent, no more insurance, no more phone bill, no more spending money. I explained that the credit card had been closed and that he had 30 days to make alternative arrangements for all these expenses. I ended the letter by saying that I would always love him as my son, but that our relationship needed to change to one of mutual respect between adults. I wrote that I was available to offer advice on budgeting and financial planning if he wanted it, but that the Bank of Mom was permanently closed. After printing the letter, I drove to Jason's apartment and slipped it under his door along with an envelope containing the last cash I would ever give him, $1,000 to help with the transition. Driving home in the gathering darkness, I felt a curious mixture of sadness and liberation. The sadness was for the years wasted, for the unhealthy dynamic I had allowed to develop. The liberation was in finally taking action and valuing myself enough to say, no more. I knew the coming days would be difficult. Jason would be angry, hurt, possibly vindictive. But for the first time in years, I was putting myself first, and it felt right. The first few days after I delivered the letter passed in unexpected silence. I had anticipated an immediate angry phone call from Jason, but my phone remained quiet. I used this time to continue reclaiming my life in smaller ways. I took a personal day from work and visited the salon, emerging with a stylish, shoulder-length cut that took years off my appearance. I bought 2 new outfits, Nothing extravagant, but modern and flattering clothes that made me feel good about myself. I signed up for a yoga class at the community center, something I had always wanted to try but never found the time or money for. On the fourth day, my phone finally rang with Jason's number. I took a deep breath before answering, centering myself for what was to come. "Mom, what the hell is going on?" Jason's voice was tight with anger. "I just got a notice from my apartment management that the rent hasn't been paid, and there's some letter saying you're withdrawing as guarantor." "Hello, Jason," I said calmly. "Did you read the letter I left you a few days ago?" "What letter? I haven't been home much. I've been staying at Dad and Brenda's the last few nights." Of course he had. I wondered briefly if he had even noticed the envelope of cash I'd left. "I left a detailed letter explaining that I'm no longer in a position to support you financially," I said, keeping my voice steady. "This includes your rent car payment, insurance, phone, and other expenses I've been covering." "What? You can't just cut me off like that." The shock in his voice was almost comical, as if the idea that his mother might stop paying his bills had never occurred to him as a possibility. "I'm not cutting you off, Jason. I'm expecting you to support yourself like any other 24-year-old with a college degree and full-time job. But I can't afford all that on my salary, you know that." "Then you'll need to make some changes," I replied. "Find a less expensive apartment, sell the car for something more affordable, cut back on non-essentials." "This is insane," he sputtered. "Is this because of what I said at dinner? I was just being honest." "This isn't about punishing you, Jason. This is about establishing a healthier relationship between us. One that isn't based on financial dependence. Healthier for who I'm going to lose my apartment." "How is that healthy?" I took another deep breath. "Only if you choose not to pay the rent yourself or find a roommate to share costs. You have options, Jason. They just might require some adjustments to your lifestyle." "I can't believe this," he said, his voice rising. "After everything I've been through with the divorce and having to shuttle between you and Dad, now you're throwing me out on the street." The attempt at guilt-tripping might have worked a week ago, but not today. "You're 24 years old, Jason. You have a degree from a good university that I paid for. You have a job. You have a father with considerable resources. You are not being thrown out on the street. You are being asked to be financially independent, like millions of other adults your age." "This is such bullshit," he exploded. "I'm calling Dad. He'll talk some sense into you." The call ended abruptly. I sat with my phone in my hand, surprised at how calm I felt. There had been a time when the thought of Michael talking sense into me would have filled me with anxiety. Now it seemed almost laughable. Sure enough, less than an hour later, Michael called. "Sadie, what's this about cutting Jason off?" His voice had that smoothly reasonable tone he used when he thought he was managing a situation. I had once found it reassuring. Now I recognized it as condescension. "Hello, Michael. This isn't about cutting Jason off. It's about expecting our adult son to be financially independent. He's just starting out in his career. He needs support to get established. He's been out of college for over a year," I pointed out, "and he has a good entry-level position thanks to Brenda's connections. It's time he learned to live within his means. This seems very sudden. What brought this on?" I considered mentioning Jason's loser comment or the fact that apparently Michael and Brenda discussed my failings with my son, but that would derail the conversation into defensiveness and recrimination. "It's not sudden, Michael. It's overdue. I've been enabling behavior that isn't helping Jason become a responsible adult. I should have done this sooner." "Well, Brenda and I aren't in a position to take over all these payments," he said, cutting to his real concern. I almost laughed. Of course, that was his worry, not Jason's character development, but the potential impact on his wallet. "I'm not asking you to. I'm suggesting that Jason learn to support himself like most adults his age." "That's easy for you to say. You don't understand the pressures he's under in the corporate world, the expectations to maintain a certain image." Now I did laugh, a short, disbelieving sound. "Michael, I raised him alone while working 2 jobs after you left. Don't talk to me about not understanding pressure." The silence on the other end suggested my comment had hit home. "Look," I continued, softening my tone slightly, "this isn't about you or me or our past. This is about Jason's future. He needs to learn financial independence and responsibility. Surely we can agree on that." "In principle, yes." Michael admitted reluctantly, but the timing and methods seem harsh. Sometimes clarity is mistaken for harshness, I replied. I've been very clear with Jason about what's changing and why. The rest is up to him. After a few more minutes of discussion that went nowhere, Michael ended the call with a warning that I might regret this decision. I set down the phone, made myself a cup of tea, and sat in my backyard watching the evening light fade, feeling more at peace than I had in years. Over the next few days, the calls and texts from Jason increased in frequency and intensity. He cycled through anger bargaining, guilt tripping, and finally threats. If you do this, we're done. Read one particularly nasty text. Don't expect to be part of my life or any grandchildren I might have. That one stung, but I held firm. I responded simply, I love you, Jason. When you're ready to have an adult relationship based on mutual respect, I'll be here. A week after my initial letter, the real consequences began hitting home for Jason. His car insurance was canceled. His cell phone service was reduced to the basic plan. His credit card was declined when he tried to use it. He showed up at my door unannounced one evening, his face a storm cloud of emotion. This has gone far enough, he said, without preamble when I opened the door. You've made your point. Now turn everything back on. Hello to you too, Jason, I said, not moving to let him in. As I've explained, these aren't temporary measures to make a point. These are permanent changes to our relationship. You can't do this, he shouted, loud enough that my neighbor across the street looked up from watering her flowers. That car is mine. You gave it to me. The car is in my name. I've been making the payments. Legally, it belongs to me, I said, keeping my voice low and calm. I've consulted with an attorney to confirm this. Jason's face reddened further. So that's it. You're taking back everything? After all these years of saying you'd always be there for me? I am here for you, Jason. With love, with emotional support, with guidance if you want it. What I'm no longer providing is financial support for a lifestyle you can't afford on your own. This is such crap, he said, his voice dropping to a disgusted mutter. Dad was right about you. Always have to control everything. I felt a flash of anger, but kept it in check. You're entitled to your opinion, but my decision stands. Fine, he snapped. Keep the stupid car. Keep everything. I don't need your help. Brenda's already talking to her friend about a better job for me anyway. That's good to hear, I said sincerely. I hope it works out. He gave me one last glare before turning and stomping back to his car, which I now realized must be a rental or borrowed from his father. As he drove away, I felt a pang of sadness, but also a renewed conviction that I was doing the right thing, however difficult. 2 days later, I received a call from the apartment complex manager. Jason had vacated the apartment without formal notice. There was damage to the walls and carpet that would exceed the security deposit. As guarantor, I would be responsible for the remaining rent and damages. It was a financial hit I hadn't fully anticipated, but I accepted it as the cost of finally drawing this boundary. I arranged to inspect the apartment myself and was saddened by what I found. Holes punched in walls, stains on carpets, a bathroom door torn from its hinges. The physical manifestation of my son's rage. I hired a cleaning service and a handyman to address the worst of the damage, aware that this would be the last money I spent cleaning up Jason's messes, literally and figuratively. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned that Jason had moved in with Michael and Brenda temporarily while he reorganized his finances. I wondered how that arrangement was working out, especially given Michael's comment about not being prepared to take over Jason's expenses. 3 weeks after our confrontation, I received an unexpected text from Jason. Can we talk? No demands, no accusations, no guilt tripping, just a simple request for communication. It was the first hopeful sign I'd seen. Can we talk? I stared at those 3 simple words on my phone screen, surprised by how my heart raced at this small olive branch from Jason. After 3 weeks of angry messages, accusations, and finally silence, these words represented the first potential thaw. I waited an hour before responding, not out of spite, but to ensure my answer came from a place of calm consideration rather than eager relief. Yes, we can talk, I finally texted back. Would you like to meet somewhere or talk by phone? His response came quickly. Could we meet for coffee tomorrow, Mayfield Cafe at 10? The suggestion of a public place rather than my home was telling. Perhaps he wanted neutral territory, or maybe he was still too angry to face me in private. Either way, I appreciated the step toward civilized communication. "I'll be there," I replied. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks, not because I expected a full reconciliation, but because any communication that wasn't filled with anger felt like progress. I was under no illusion that one coffee meeting would repair the damage to our relationship. Real healing would take time, if it happened at all. The next morning, I arrived at the cafe 10 minutes early and chose a quiet table in the corner. I ordered a simple black coffee and waited, trying to keep my expectations modest. Jason arrived precisely at 10, another small surprise. Punctuality had never been his strong suit. He looked different. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a plain button-down shirt. His hair was slightly longer, less perfectly styled. But the most noticeable difference was in his expression, a new wariness mixed with what appeared to be genuine fatigue. "Hi, Mom," he said as he sat down across from me, his voice lacking its recent edge of hostility. "Hello, Jason," I replied, resisting the urge to reach across and straighten his collar or comment on the dark circles under his eyes. Those maternal instincts would always be there, but I was learning to moderate them. "How are you?" He gave a short, humorless laugh. "Honestly, I've been better." The waitress came by and he ordered a coffee and a breakfast sandwich, checking the price on the menu first I noticed. When she left, he fidgeted with the napkin dispenser, avoiding my eyes. "So, things have been pretty crazy since everything changed." I nodded, but remained silent, giving him space to continue without interruption. "I moved in with Dad and Brenda after the apartment situation," he said, a slight flush rising on his cheeks at the mention of the trashed apartment. "I thought it would be temporary, just until I figured things out." He paused as the waitress delivered his coffee. After taking a sip, he continued. "Living with them is not what I expected. They have all these rules. Curfews, expectations about helping around the house, limits on having friends over. Dad says I need to contribute to groceries and utilities if I'm going to stay there. Brenda's been pushing me to look for a better paying job." I kept my expression neutral, though inwardly I was both surprised and somewhat gratified that Michael and Brenda weren't simply taking over where my enabling had left off. "That sounds challenging," I offered when he paused again. "Yeah, well, it's been an adjustment," he admitted. "I lost my job last week, too." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely concerned. "What happened?" Jason shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "My boss said my attitude and performance weren't up to standards. I was late a few times because of the new living arrangement and transportation issues, and I guess I wasn't handling the stress well." His breakfast sandwich arrived, and he ate half of it quickly before continuing. "Anyway, I've been doing some thinking," he said, carefully folding the paper wrapper from his sandwich. "And I owe you an apology." The words hung in the air between us. I hadn't expected this, at least not so soon. "What I said at dinner that night," he continued when I didn't immediately respond, "calling you a loser. That was cruel and completely out of line. I've been replaying it in my head, and I can't believe I said that to you. I'm truly sorry, Mom." I took a moment to process his apology, making sure my response wasn't just an automatic, "It's okay," that would minimize the hurt he had caused. "Thank you for apologizing, Jason. That means a lot to me." Those words were very painful to hear. He nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "I know. And they weren't true. Not even close." "What made you say them?" I asked, gently, genuinely curious about what had been going through his mind. Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I think I was trying to impress Dad and Brenda by parroting their values. They talk a lot about ambition and success in material terms, and I got caught up in it thinking that was what mattered." He took another bite of his sandwich, chewing slowly before continuing. "Living with them has shown me the reality behind the image. Their relationship is all about status and appearances. They argue constantly about money, even though they have plenty. They're always worried about what other people think. It's exhausting." I felt a pang of sympathy for my son, even as I recognized this as an important life lesson for him. "The thing is," he said, meeting my eyes directly for the first time, "watching how they live has made me realize something. You're not the loser, Mom. If anything, you've been winning at the things that actually matter. You've had a career you loved. You've maintained real friendships for decades. You've lived authentically according to your own values." His words brought unexpected tears to my eyes, which I quickly blinked away. This insight showed a maturity I hadn't seen in him before. "That means a great deal to me, Jason. Thank you." He nodded, then took a deep breath. "So I need to figure out what's next. I've applied for some jobs, nothing fancy, just to get an income while I reassess my priorities, and I'm looking at sharing an apartment with two guys I knew from college. It would be tight, but doable." "That sounds like a solid plan," I said, careful not to offer financial assistance that would undermine the growth I was seeing. "I'm not asking for money," he added quickly, as if reading my thoughts. "I know that chapter is closed, and honestly, I think it needed to be. I miss having you in my life, Mom. As a person, not as a bank." The simple honesty of this statement touched me deeply. "I've missed you too, Jason." "Do you think we can start over somehow?" he asked, vulnerability evident in his voice. "Build a different kind of relationship." I considered his question carefully. Not start over exactly, because we can't erase our history together, but we can certainly move forward differently with mutual respect and clearer boundaries. He nodded, seeming to appreciate my candor. "I'd like that." We talked for another hour more openly than we had in years. Jason shared his genuine uncertainties about his career path, admitting that the corporate track his father had pushed him toward didn't actually align with his interests. I shared some of my plans for the coming years, including the trip to England I was now saving for. As our conversation wound down, Jason asked hesitantly, "Would it be okay if I stopped by the house sometime next week just to talk more?" "I'd like that," I said sincerely. "You're always welcome in my home, Jason. That hasn't changed." We parted with an awkward but genuine hug, the first physical contact we'd had in months. Driving home, I felt cautiously optimistic. This wasn't a fairy tale ending where all problems were instantly solved. Jason still had significant challenges ahead: finding a new job, securing affordable housing, rebuilding his credit, and most importantly, continuing to develop the maturity and self-awareness he had begun to show today. Our relationship would need time to heal, with likely setbacks along the way. Trust, once damaged, doesn't repair overnight. But the simple fact that he had taken responsibility for his hurtful words and recognized the need for change gave me hope. I also recognized my own growth through this painful process. I had established boundaries that should have been in place years ago. I had reclaimed my financial independence and, with it, my self-respect. I was finally putting my own needs on an equal footing with my son's, which paradoxically seemed to be better for both of us. A week later, as promised, Jason came to visit. He brought a small potted plant as a gift and stayed for dinner. Our conversation was sometimes awkward, but increasingly honest. He told me he'd found a temporary job at a local bookstore and was interviewing for a marketing position at a small nonprofit, a significant departure from the corporate path he'd been on. "The pay would be a lot less than what I was making," he admitted, "but the work seems meaningful and the people I met there really care about what they're doing." Over the following months, our relationship continued to evolve. Jason did get the nonprofit job and moved into a shared apartment with two roommates. He started therapy, which he said was helping him work through issues related to the divorce and his relationship with both his parents. I kept my financial boundaries firm, but found other ways to support him. I helped him create a realistic budget, taught him to cook simple, economical meals, and occasionally sent care packages with homemade cookies and practical items like socks or toiletries, comfort without enabling. As for me, I continued my own journey of rediscovery. I joined a book club, started taking weekend photography classes, and even went on a few dates after Martha insisted on setting me up with her husband's recently widowed friend. None of the dates led to serious relationships, but they helped me remember that I was more than just Jason's mother. 6 months after our confrontation, Jason invited me to dinner at a modest neighborhood restaurant, insisting on paying the bill. As we enjoyed our meal, he handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked, opening it to find a check. "It's the first payment," he explained. "I'm paying back what I can for the apartment damages. It's not much, but I'm going to keep sending what I can until it's paid off." I was touched by this gesture, not because of the money itself, but because of what it represented: genuine accountability and a desire to make amends. "Thank you, Jason. That means a lot. I've been thinking, he said, twirling pasta on his fork. Those words Dad and Brenda used about success and being a loser or winner in life, they're so hollow. Real success isn't about the car you drive or the address on your mail. I smiled, hearing echoes of values I had tried to instill in him from childhood. What is it about then? I asked, curious to hear his perspective. I think it's about integrity, he said thoughtfully. About being true to yourself and treating others with respect. About taking responsibility for your actions and their consequences. He looked up at me, a new wisdom in his eyes. By those measures, Mom, you're the most successful person I know. And I'm still learning how to follow your example. In that moment, I knew that the painful decision I had made that night after the disastrous dinner had been absolutely right. Sometimes, love means letting go, establishing boundaries, and allowing the people we care about to experience the natural consequences of their actions. It isn't easy, but as Jason and I had both discovered, it can lead to growth that might never happen otherwise. Our story continues to unfold with challenges and reconciliation steps forward and occasional steps back, but the foundation has shifted to something healthier, more balanced, and ultimately more loving than what we had before. What I've learned through this experience is that true love isn't about endless giving until you're depleted. It's about creating relationships where everyone can thrive, grow, and contribute. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give those we love is the opportunity to stand on their own feet, even when that process is painful for everyone involved. If you've ever faced a similar situation with a loved one, whether a child partner or friend, remember that establishing boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary for healthy relationships. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that ultimately strengthened a relationship? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation and growth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you find the courage to make the changes needed in your own relationships.